built a church atop the spirits and the bones. Their moans were heard as they were laying down the stones. But the witches got revenge beneath that steeple bell. They cast a spell, sent the reverend to hell. No time was wasted in assembling a squad. This pitchfork army on a mission sent from God. No witch was safe from Reverend Paris's brigade. Their crusade, their crusade, their crusade. Call the magistrate and don't you wait another minute, cause this town is going to hell if we don't put away the sinning. And we got no time to let a jury have their turn. Let 'em burn, let 'em burn, let 'em burn. The damned were crammed into a carriage on the square. Their faces battered and their bodies all were bare. The Reverend led them to an isolated hill. Time to kill, time to kill, time to kill. One by one their necks were snapped beneath the cedar tree. The spirits vanished and the demons all were free. They dug a hole to hold the devilish remains. They were slain, they were slain, they were slain. The town was safe from all those wicked dissidents. They could continue with their life of innocence, dispensing justice from a higher power. They built a church atop the spirits and the bones. Their moans were heard as they were laying down the stones. But the witches got revenge beneath that steeple bell. They cast a spell, sent the reverend to hell.
Now!
Hi, it me. What's up?
Happy Wednesday, everybody. We are halfway through the week, so that's cool. I always like it when we survived. Some weeks are better than others. Sorry, my hair is like a complete and utter disaster zone. I showered really quickly and tried to dry it really quickly, and it was just like, haha. So, good evening. So this week, we've got our DM chat tonight, right now, live. And then tomorrow, no, not this week. So this week we have Sunday. We'll have a 10 a.m. River of Terrycell game. And we will be back, and we will potentially finally get out of the city of Ambrose.
Come all up!
The cats are out and causing trouble. So hopefully we'll actually be out of the city of Ambrose next game. And see what happens there and what chaos they get into or walk into. So, yeah. And then next week we'll have DM chats with Carolyn.
Leave it. Come on up.
She's after some plastic nonsense. So, sorry, cats are always obnoxious for as cute and cuddly as they are. So tonight I wanted to talk a little bit about building, how do you bring your NPCs to life? How do you build and make NPCs that sort of stand out, that matter in your campaign? So that's what we're working on tonight. So I've got a couple of notes, and we'll see if I do my usual and go really long or not thing. So let's start with just defining on what an NPC is. I'm assuming if you're in this chat, if you're hanging about in this realm, you've probably heard of the term NPC. It usually stands for non-player character. Generally, I first came to know of it in video games because it's all the characters you interact with in video games that you can't kill. So I think something that's kind of a distinction, depending on how you want to go about it, is whether NPCs are all characters that the DM plays or not. Whether they are only helpful ones, if enemies count as NPCs, and that varies by DM. So I don't really know that there's a right answer with a lot of stuff with writing and DMing. It's sort of your mileage may vary, whatever works for you. So with that established, I think that anything that the DM is playing is an NPC. Anything that the player characters are not controlling is an NPC and is something that is under the DM control. Whether that's something as simple as a blink boar in the woods or as complicated as a villain with a massive overarching plot.
Or an NPC that we try to kill repeatedly.
Or a vital NPC that the party seems intent on taking to dangerous situations and attempting to murder. Yes.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Nope, that's never happened ever.
Nope.
So, I think NPCs are one of the most important parts of D&D and one of the most important things that you can do as a DM. Because at the end of the day, stories are about people. And so the people and the NPCs that you throw at your characters are going to help you care about the world. They're going to help your players care a little bit more about the world. And they're going to help establish what's at stake, what's going on, what's happening in your world and in your game. And hopefully that will also bring your players in to care a little bit more about the world as well. Getting players to give a shit is one of the very hardest things in D&D. It's hard. It really is. Especially having players give a shit about something besides their character. Is very challenging, and it can be very frustrating at times when it feels like you as the DM are putting all this work and effort into NPCs or into your world or into anything and your players just don't care. But players have a lot of other stuff that they're working on. Their focus is on their character, and your job as the DM is to try and draw them out of that and to get them to sort of look around at the rest of the world and be curious and be interested. And sometimes you're going to succeed and sometimes you're going to fail. So, what are some ways that you can sort of maybe try to help that happen? So I think it's really important to think about NPCs even when you think about enemies that may or may not be super smart. So say you have, let's go with the blink boar. So the blink boar is purely there to just smash stuff, essentially. These things are hitting it, it's going to hit back. It's not a very smart enemy. when you compare that to an NPC like the corrupted mound that engulfed Fox, that had a very clear goal. It was collecting pieces and leaving. And so the way that the combat goes is impacted by your role playing and by how you are playing NPCs. So I think it's really important to remember that combat is also a chance for role playing opportunities, and how your players react and how the enemies react to that. You know, in our last serial campaign game, I always call them campaigns, but in our last serial game, we started with a fight, and it was kind of funny because it was immediately clear how different our characters all reacted to a situation where we had somebody yelling at guards, essentially telling them, come get us. And so my character was the first up, and my immediate reaction was, we'll run to the leader and try and sort this out and see if they can call off the guards. Nobody came with me. And so at that point, I'm left with my character alone facing a potential big bad for at least a few seconds before somebody else gets over there. And so it's important to remember that those are role-playing situations. And that character clearly was not there to fight because he teleported away to do whatever it is he wanted to do. And so remembering that not every fight has to go to the bitter end. If you have an intelligent enemy, odds are they're going to try and save their skin, whether that's running away or begging for mercy or offering up information. They're going to offer something in exchange for their lives, most likely. And I think it's super important to remember that that is a valid option to happen in combat, and to not forget that combat can very easily still be a role-playing situation. That's something that I'm having to work on because I have never been a super combat-focused DM or player, and I'm working on getting better at it because I think it's important to expand your skill sets and learn things that you maybe aren't super comfortable with. And so for me, that's been working on learning about combat and getting more comfortable with it. So with that, let's break down a couple of things you can do for NPCs. You can make sure that NPCs that are going to stick around for a while, that are going to be a part of the story, even if it's for a short period of time, what do they want? You need to know, what is this character after ultimately? If this character is after causing as much death as possible, they're not going to flee a combat situation. They're going to stick around to the bitter end unless they know, okay, well, these jokers are now hobbled because I just beat the shit out of them. I'm going to go rampage that village now and they can't stop me. So sort of know what your characters are after. Even like the shopkeep. If you have a shopkeep that is maybe a little stingy with their goods, because perhaps they overheard the players saying something nasty about, you know, a group of orphan children running around in the city, and those aren't actually, you know, orphans, or the shopkeep helps out at the orphanage, and, you know, the shopkeep's main goal is to support these kids. So now you have a little bit of conflict with these characters. So it's important to try and remember what an NPC may want. What is their motivation? And along with that, I think it's really important to think about, what are they willing to actually give up for what they want? Because the things that we want aren't usually freely given. They aren't usually like super just like buffet style. So what is your NPC willing to sacrifice or give up for what they're after? So those are two things that you can just think about when you're starting to create NPCs. Now, obviously, when you run into what always ends up seeming to happen is, oh, we go into the bar and, you know, who's there? Bob the Goblin. And suddenly Bob the Goblin is the most popular NPC you've ever made. You know, that kind of thing happens. And, you know, so for Bob the Goblin, maybe he doesn't have a really extensive backstory, and, you know, he sort of serves as a kind of henchman or mascot for the player characters. And that's valid too. So it can be, I know there's a lot of back and forth on tag-alongs or DMPCs. So essentially, I'll give the example of Turricell. Fox is a tag-along. Fox is a character that I play as the DM that joins in with the party. And it's a really fine balance, I think, to not play Fox as if he is just my character and I am too enjoying the campaign, because it would be too easy to steal the spotlight a little bit. Especially in that case, because Fox is several levels ahead of the player. Fox has been at this a little bit longer than the players. He's a lot more experienced than the players. And so he has some abilities that could absolutely, turn the tides in battle. But Fox is very passive. He's a life cleric. His primary reason for being there is to provide muscle, because nobody in the group has any, and to provide healing, because the druid has that. So he hasn't had to do that quite as frequently, but there's not a dedicated healer in the party. And so because that is such a small group of only 3 people, I felt it was necessary to add in somebody to assist with just having bodies to hit. Because there are a lot of potential pitfalls when you are running a party of 3 players. There's a lot of issues that can happen when you get into fights, when things start going badly. So for me, I thought that it was really important to add that in. And it's interesting how different groups interact with different NPCs. The Turicel group is very trusting. The Cyril group is very suspicious. And so it's really kind of funny to watch the 2 different groups interact with different NPCs and see the different reactions. So it's good to know the group that you're playing with, to understand what kind of an NPC relationship they want, what are they looking for, what kind of game are you playing. So those are kind of important things to think about. But the main thing to remember is to make sure that your NPCs don't upstage the players. Like I said, Fox is, I think, at this point, I think Fox is a level 10 or 11, actually, at this point. And the rest of the group is 6. So, it's an interesting dichotomy to have, to try and make sure that no matter what Fox does, he's not overshadowing the players. He's not suddenly better than them at everything else, because that takes away the fun from the players. And I know as a DM it can be really tempting to do that sort of thing, because you want to play too. It's exhausting being the responsible one all the time and sort of guiding the story and controlling everything and dealing with everything. And sometimes you just want to play and be like, oh, well, my NPC did a really cool thing. But that's not what you're doing as a DM. As a DM, you're there to help make your players shine. And so that's something I've been thinking about a lot with Fox, and going forward I think it's going to be a very different interaction that he's going to be having with the players, which you may or may not see in the next game, depending on what happens. But you at the end of the day, you have to remember that the NPCs should never outshine the PCs. I will say the only exception to this rule is if you are trying to show the PCs to not do something. So, you establish an incredibly powerful NPC. You show how amazing they are, how great they are at doing everything that the players want to do. And then you show that NPC getting their ass vaporized to show the PCs, oh, we're not ready to face that dragon. Like, that person who single-handedly wiped the floor with the 5 of us just got wiped out in 6 seconds. Like, let's not do that. Let's not go that way. I think that's an appropriate use of a super overpowered NPC. It always varies campaign by campaign. I'm sure there are campaigns out there where it actually would be kind of funny to have it so every NPC is ridiculously overpowered and the PCs are little squishy scrawnies, like peons trying to survive in the world. I think that would be really interesting. Basically, you have, random commoners living among literal gods, and what does that look like for them? But generally speaking, your PC should always be in the spotlight. There should be chances for them to shine and to excel and to show off. So be careful to not allow NPCs to outshine them, which isn't to say they can't be more powerful. Obviously, you're going to have more powerful NPCs, but especially if they're going to be tag-alongs, you need to be really careful to not have them overshadow the rest of the group, because that can turn a little bit demoralizing for players. One of the things that continuously happens with a lot of DMs is you're just, you're messing around and they're like, oh, I'm in the bar, who's there? And you're like, oh, well, shit, I didn't plan for this. So you have no NPCs, you have nothing prepared. So I thought I'd give a little bit of resources and tips about how to create NPCs on the fly. So one of the things that police departments have is they call it, it's a rogues gallery, and it's essentially what they can use for a police lineup. So if you find a picture online that you think is really cool, save it. Create your own digital or physical rogues gallery. Have files of pictures that you can flip through pretty quickly to be like, oh, yep, that one, that's an NPC. That can be really helpful. Also, one of the things that I've seen recently, and I cannot remember who posted about this on Twitter, is that you can have we're not talking about the hamster incident. Is you can have is if you are being asked on the fly to come up with a name for something, what you can do is look around the room and take the first half of one word and the second half of another word and kind of just smush them together. So looking around the room, I see a bottle, I see a microphone, so baton. There we go, we've got a name. It might come up with a stupid name, it might be a really cool name, but looking around the room and smooshing two things together can be a really fun way to come up with names on the fly, because that way you don't end up with 18 NPCs named Greg, or Bob, or Fred, or whatever.
Or letting your PCs then name the NPCs.
Or letting your PCs name them and they end up as Sparkle Cannons for the rest of forever and no one can remember their actual name.
Sparkle Tits, thank you. Or my favorite, Detective Baguette and Captain Crostini.
Mm-hmm. Though I do think that if your PCs have come up with a backstory that involves an NPC, they should name them. Like Verity has a huge family in Cyril, and that would have been really mean to be like, hey Carolyn, you need to come up with 9 NPCs that are his family. That would have been a little bit mean and unnecessary, so in that case the PC is responsible for coming up with those. But yeah, so that's one way that you can try and do it. Another thing is to just go ahead and compile a bunch of names and make yourself a roll table. Have a bunch of names, make a D100 chart, and just roll on it and see what name you end up with today and who's your NPC is today. And you can do that with anything. You could do that with what race they are, what gender they are, what's their hair color, eye color, height, accent, attire. You can do that for a bunch of stuff. I, forever ago, made a character trait chart that you probably can't see at all in this, but it's a D100, and it's just got a bunch of different traits. So I'm going to borrow one of your dice, and we'll see who we come up with. Yeah, I know, I'll create all their backstories too. I know, it's nonsense. It's complete nonsense.
And yet you did it.
And yet I did it. I love characters. Characters are my favorite part of anything that I do, anything that I write. That notebook may have, in fact, been just one character's backstory. Poor Carolyn. Today, in fact, I sent her a 2,500-word short story about one of my characters' backstories with NPCs. Just today, in fact. Okay, so first roll is a 12. So a gentle 9. Kind-hearted. Please come up with bitch. Seductive. Alright, so we've got a gentle, kind-hearted, seductive
bitch
NPC. We'll do one more, and I'll just knock that on my phone. Anyways, and that's a repeat. And they are helpful. So we've created a very nice, very helpful NPC.
Who just flirts a lot.
Who is super flirty. So we basically just built Verity. Is essentially what just
I
happened.
was gonna say we just built Jeff, but Jeff isn't.
Jeff is not gentle.
Nor super helpful sometimes.
Nor super helpful sometimes. But very seductive. So, you know, we've got that. Yeah. Yeah, I love backstories and coming up with them. But yeah, making yourself tables to roll on can save you a lot of trouble in the future. So if you have some time, I really recommend doing that because it can be super helpful when you get those obnoxious questions of, what's the shopkeep's name? And I mean, you could even do that with like backstories in the player's handbook. They have the roll for your history thing. You know,
in the player's handbook and Xanthar's guide to everything.
Yeah, so in Xanthar's and the player's handbook, in the back sections, there's actually like a roll for history option, and we did that for some of the serial characters, and it was really fun. That's how Verity got and lost a horse.
That's also how Brian got his backstory.
Yeah, and so it's you can use that too to help with your NPCs, because I know that coming up with stuff on the fly can be a pain sometimes. And okay, but a couple of helpful resources is there's a website that I love that's called npcgenerator.com, and it's awesome because it provides a name, what they look like, what their alignment is, like some secrets they may have, and their stats.
Pretty sure I use that.
Which is super. That's always hilarious when I do it, and it's like, they're a blacksmith, strength -1. And I'm like,
Excuse me?
I guess they could run the shop and not make
Maybe
stuff?
they're old and they've retired.
But, so that's, sorry if there's heavy breathing by the mic, the cat was sniffing it. Hello, tiny cat. And so that one's really good. I like that one a lot. There's also rpgtinker.com. And that one I really like because it actually includes battle stuff. So it includes like what weapons they could have and what spells and abilities they could use in battle. So if your players get into a tavern brawl because they're being dicks,
don't you dare.
You could use that as well to develop who they're fighting, rather than frantically trying to flip through the DMGs or the monster manuals or all of that fun stuff. That one's really good too. And then there's always Don John, however you actually say it. I don't know. DONJON, and then it's .bin.sh. But he's got a ton of generators. There's like item generators, shop generators, town generators, NPC generators. There's stuff for Pathfinder, 5e, just general fantasy, D20 systems. It's great. It's really, really helpful, I have found, in a lot of ways. Oh, okay, it's French. Nice. But yeah, so those are the three that I tend to go to. I really enjoy all of those. And if anyone has any questions, just pop them into the chat at any point as well. But yeah, so those are the things I would suggest that DMs or game masters or whatever you want to call yourself can do to help out, is to come up with your own roll tables. This is really helpful because you know what kind of questions your players ask. Like, I ruin Carolyn's life all the time by asking what people are called. Like, I was talking to a bunny rabbit and asked what its name was, and Carolyn was just like, fuck you. Because that's just how I am, and that's how the character I play is. So having tables with name options or gender options or race options or all of that stuff can really save you in a pinch, because then all you have to do is, roll. Which, you know, rolling for no reason can also make your players really nervous too, so that's a double win. That's one of my favorite things to do. But then otherwise, if you have like a phone or a tablet or some sort of electronic device, go to one of the generator sites that I mentioned. So NPC generator, whatever. You guys got them. We'll pop them in the chat in a minute here. But yeah, so those are all really great. And and they have a lot of different uses. Some of them are better in different ways. I think my favorite has got to be the NPC generator one, just because it does provide sort of the most out-of-the-box, ready-to-use NPC. You've got stats and everything for them too, so when someone inevitably tries to roll seduction or charm or deceit or persuasion, you have stats that you can use ready to roll, ready to use, which can be really helpful because players do wackadoo stuff sometimes.
As someone who's done wackadoo stuff, yes.
As someone who is usually the cause of, I think that's what Turicel gets me, is since I usually am the one causing mass chaos, I'm very confused to not have mass chaos constantly happening. So I just don't even know what to do. But yeah, and as a final thing, I think it's important to pay attention to what your players are looking for in a game. Like we say in pretty much all of our DM chats, it's all about communication amongst the players and the DMs to make sure that everyone is still enjoying the story that's being told. And what that may mean is NPCs that you may have big grand backstories for, that grand backstory might not fit with the story that you're telling anymore. If your players are looking for something more dungeony and suddenly you've got a really dramatic, epic backstory that has nothing to do with dungeons for an NPC, your players might not care about it. They'll just, say, point me to the MacGuffin and let me get it. And that's okay too. That's the cool thing about D&D is you can adjust it as you go. You're not beholden to stick with one thing forever. So that's really cool and that's super fun. What is happening over there? What is happening here?
The donjon is the highest point of the castle. Is the highest tower of a castle, and I asked if that's where the bathroom was.
Yep, it is. Unless you're in Harry Potter before plumbing was invented, where they just shat themselves and then magicked themselves clean. Thanks, JK. It's Gavity. Oh no, Gavin's here.
Oh, Gavin.
But yeah, I will say something to remember as a PC, as a player character, is that if you create a backstory and you give NPCs to your DM, they're not yours anymore. They are the DM's. Whether they're alive, whether they're dead, whether they're missing, whether you don't know who they are. I was an orphan, I don't know who my parents are. Your parents are in the DM's hands now. They're the DM's NPCs now. So try to remember that and not be upset if maybe they're played differently than you were anticipating or than you had planned, because that's what D&D is. It's collaborative storytelling. And most PCs, you're going to have NPCs in your backstory. Very few show up, I know no one and have never met a person in my life. I'm 1,000% sure that character exists and that somebody out there has played them. And kudos to you, you brave mute fool, because no one taught you to talk.
He was raised by ants.
That's still, nope, then the ants are NPCs. Nope.
They existed in a grove, and I don't know how they survived, because there was no one to take care of them.
Yep.
But magically.
They suckled from maple trees.
Yeah.
Grew strong on maple syrup, and now they are Canada man. That's there. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. But yeah, your NPCs, after you have created them and given them to your DM, belong to your DM. Most players will have some NPCs in their backstory. Not everyone will. So if that's you, you do you. There's not really a wrong way to play D&D, so have fun with it. And at the end of the day, just try to remember that you're playing a game with your friends, and make NPCs that you think your friends are going to want to play with and that you're going to want to be. Because if you make somebody that actually annoys everybody, including yourself, you're probably not going to enjoy that too much. Which is why I don't do accents for most of my NPCs, because 1, I can't keep a consistent one, and 2, the only ones I can do would annoy me very quickly, and I would not enjoy doing them. So I tend to not do that. But if you do accents as a DM, more power to you, because you are amazing and far talented-er than I. And that may be a good point to actually make a note in your DM notes on what that person sounds like. Lol, 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 lol. If you do have repeating NPCs, I would suggest printing out a character sheet for them and taking notes. So that if your NPC just like, drops a random thing about my cousin died to, the measles plague, then you've got a note of that somewhere.
Damn anti-vaxxers.
Plague enthusiasts. Yeah, I think that's basically it, generally speaking, for NPC wise at least. Yeah, just think about the kind of group that you are playing with. If your group is a really roleplay heavy group and you are doing a sort of campaign where you are bad cat. Where you're building a story and doing all of that
Doing
stuff.
a campaign where you know bad cat. Okay.
Where you know bad cat. I know bad cat. I know 2 bad cats, in fact. They're so lucky that they're cute because they're really annoying otherwise. Yeah, thought's gone now. But yeah, at the end of the day, remember you're all playing D&D. Play it the way that it's fun for you, whether that's building together, whether that's following a path, whether that's creating a ton of NPCs, whether that's creating no NPCs, whether that's doing silly voices, whether that's doing serious voices. Play the game that works for you and your group. It's the same as pretty much every D&D tap where we say, D&D is whatever you make of it, essentially. You can take it or leave it. It's basically giving you the Lego blocks to build how you want to play. And for me, that includes a lot of NPCs and a lot of backstories and stuff. Because that's what I enjoy. I hope that's what my players enjoy. If they don't, then they haven't said anything. So, we'll see. And, yeah, unless there's any questions.
Not really.
Alright, well then, I guess we'll call it an evening, and I did not quite go, I didn't go as long as I normally do at all, so yay me.
So proud of you.
I know, right? That's, I guess, it for NPCs. As always, if you guys have any questions outside of the fact after any of these, you're welcome to reach out to us on social media. And then I have my social media handle down here if you want to ask anything directly. And yeah, NPCs for me and the entire process for D&D are very tied up in storytelling because that's what I do. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's really exciting. You should check out the Uncaged anthology if you haven't. It is an anthology all about female monsters, sort of getting just desserts, and it's a collection of a ton of modules. I think it's 250 pages of D&D modules, including one by me. So I'm really excited about it, and really looking forward to hearing people run it and have fun. And I think that's all now. We'll be back on Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for River of Terrycell, where you can tune in and see some of the NPCs, because we'll have 3 of the long-standing NPCs in Terrycell in this next session. So you can see sort of how they interact with one another and the players as well. And I guess that's it. And I'm going to scooch off the camera now so I can push the button. And we'll see you all Sunday at 10 a.m.
Bye, Internet.